I'm Suzanne Mulligan. I love collecting interesting people. I started interviewing family members in the 1980s with a small tape recorder before I even knew anything about oral history. After majoring in journalism at the University of Queensland and doing an oral history workshop, I started my collection in 2002 with my first interviewee, a World War I veteran. Over the years, I've enjoyed interviewing a diverse range of people, including war veterans, a man who went to Antarctica in the 1930s, prison warden, rowers, priest, Paralympian, engineer, botanist, and more. I found these people through newspaper articles or referrals or meeting these people that I thought would have an interesting story. I received no payment for these interviews, but I conducted them in a professional manner using the Oral History Handbook. The interviewees receive a transcript of the interview and an audio CD. I've done some paid interviews, but those interviews belong to the organisations who paid me. My freelance practice has brought me immense pleasure as I listen to people's stories, and they enjoy telling them. For example, Muriel Barr. She worked in the Navy during the Second World War and then became one of Queensland's first policewomen. Here she deals with the case of a pregnant child called Betty. The photos shown in the video are of Muriel.
I remember one in particular. She was only 14 and she lived on a dairy farm up the north coast somewhere. I was working with the detectives and they took me out to interview her, and she'd had this baby. We went to the dairy farm and we saw her and her mother and grandmother. Well, grandmother was terrific. She had an enormous safety pin across there, I remember, and her hair was all long and matted and whatnot, and she was trying to make out that she didn't know Betty was pregnant. And I said to her, "But you must have known Betty was pregnant." I said, "Couldn't you see that she was getting fat?" And she said, "Oh yes, but I thought that was because she was drinking so much condensed milk," which tickled me on a dairy farm, condensed milk. But that was Grandma's story and she stuck to it. I saw Betty when she was in hospital, just after she had the baby. Poor downtrodden girl she was. And I said to her, "You know, Betty, you have beautiful hair. If you were to wash and brush it, it would be simply glorious." And she burst into tears and she said, "That's the nicest thing anyone has ever said to me." Wasn't that terrible? That poor girl. Well, they used to send the girls to a shelter at Toowong. I think it was called St Mary's. Well, from there they disposed of the baby. Sometime after, I had actually left the police force. I was married and I was walking down Adelaide Street one day and this young woman walked toward me and I was taken by her hair. It was fair and I thought, "Oh, isn't that hair beautiful?" And she was beautifully dressed, and when she got close to me she came up and spoke to me and she said, "Oh, Miss Beresford." And I looked at her and I said, "Oh, it's Betty, isn't it?" And she said, "Yes." "Oh," I said, "Betty, you look simply beautiful." I said, "I was struck by your hair, but I said, you're beautifully dressed. Are you working?" And she said, "Oh yes, I have a job at Shingle Inn." She had a job at Shingle Inn. And I said, you really look beautiful. And she said, well, I have you to thank for that. And I felt quite pleased when I walked away. I felt that in my own small way I had accomplished something.
With my oral history collection, I feel I have accomplished something. Thank you.